Hey folks, and welcome to a daily rating special. This week, we'll get Vincent's thoughts on the original Star Trek movies. Vince will give a brief review of the 6 films, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the films. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. The 6 Star Trek films in order are The Motion Picture by Robert Weiss, The Wrath of Khan by Nicholas Meyer, The Search for Spock, directed by Leonard Nimoy, The Voyage Home, directed by Leonard Nimoy, The Final Frontier by William Shatner, and finally, The Undiscovered Country, directed again by Nicholas Meyer. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, sir?
Thomas, how's it going?
It's going okay, buddy. How was your special watch this week?
Special watch was a treat. Of course, diving into the 6 original Star Trek movies. Something I was very excited to tackle.
This is a fun one.
Absolutely.
This is a fun one. And I don't know if, and for those of you who don't know, Vin, huge Star Trek guy. Got me into Star Trek, both original, next gen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's probably a good way to lead off with all of this because, as far as my engagement with this show, with this series, believe me, I am a Trek nerd. I think for reviewing these movies, folks, I do want to make it a mix for the audience members that have not seen these films. I definitely don't want to get into spoiler.
Right, we try to stay away from them.
Absolutely.
Try not to geek out too much,
Exactly. And I really do want to focus on the actual film criticism of it, despite, maybe a specific element that I really like that's a callback to the show. Original series as well is my favorite of the Star Trek.
And it should just be said, again, maybe people are starting to pick up and everything. Me, this is the first time I'm going to be hearing the numbers as well, your ratings. I mean, that's how we do it. I have no idea until we actually doing the show. Mm-hmm. And I just know going into it, and because I actually haven't seen all of these.
Sure.
And I'm excited because you are such a Star Trek fan and such a sci-fi fan, mm-hmm. You're probably going to would mark them higher than me.
Sure.
So I'm interested because I have watched, like I said, I haven't watched all of them, but I have watched some, and it's going to be interesting kind of where you put them.
And I think just in general, talking about the amount of films that we're dealing with here, these movies alone, 6. The Next Gen's movies brings it up to 10, and then you have the remakes, which brings it up to 13. Mm-hmm. This can be kind of put head-to-head against Star Wars, which...
just the amount.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah,
exactly. So,
So first of all, let me, before we just start,
mm-hmm.
I want to know, when was the last time you really sat down and watched these?
I would say Wrath of Khan I watched most recently just because I was craving Wrath of Khan.
Okay.
I would say the farthest away, or maybe the one I watched the least was Voyage Home, the 4th one.
Okay, so how long? How many years has that been?
I want to say maybe at least 7, 8 plus.
Oh, good. Okay,
what we're talking about here.
So was it fun to sit down and just go through them? And I'm assuming this is the first time you really back to back, and critically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you've done the marathon before, yeah?
Probably. Maybe not all 6, but
right.
It was a good time, and I mean, I think for a lot of these, again, the outlook here is kind of 50-50 if you're a Star Trek fan, and maybe the other side of that is if you're not a Star Trek fan to it. No matter what, I am a huge enjoyer of this franchise. I love it to death, and original series is my baby. So, believe me,
we'll see how critical you can be. Then it's putting you to the test.
I think you'll be shocked.
Hey, without further ado, let's start with the first one that came out. Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 1979.
Yep.
What do we have?
All right, The Motion Picture. This one is a little bit of an oddball. We have, in the course of a Star Trek original series, obviously the show ended back in 63 to 65 or so.
That was the gap.
Yeah. Major hiatus. And in between there, we have monoliths like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Wars itself.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Kind. So Star Trek: The Motion Picture is really a amalgamation of a lot of themes. Also, apparently, in the production of this movie, this original plot was supposed to be the lead into Star Trek Phase 2, which was supposed to be a rekindling of the original series.
With original cast.
Exactly. Pre-Next Gen and be an entire series. Apparently, the pressure of these movies, most notably Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 77, I want to say, created a pressure among Paramount to say, hey, we got to just make these into movies.
We got to make blockbusters.
Exactly.
That's the idea was.
Exactly.
The director, Robert Weiss, how much involved in the original series TV?
I'm not too sure off the top of my head, but as far as the director, he is the only director, he is the only one that did not direct future films, because obviously we have involvement from the main cast being Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner.
And Nicholas Meyer then just also did too.
Yeah. My boy Nick. He does a good job.
Gene Roddenberry was around for writing and everything like that.
Yes, I believe he only passed away by the time the last one came out, Undiscovered Country.
Right, yeah.
And that's, of course, now overlapping with Next Gen. Of course, that would be Picard and Riker and whatnot.
Of course.
You know.
Data, my favorite.
Absolutely. But motion picture is an oddball. That type of background is not just for fluff. Believe me, it definitely does show how this film was produced, because it is a mix of a lot of different tones and styles, and you can see that definitely in the script itself, it was going for a much more grandiose sci-fi than the original series show was, and the style of it is, I mean, there's straight up horror elements mixed in here. There are very trippy elements, a la 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I'm sure not by accident those are in there.
Absolutely. And for that reason, it's a little bit of a mess. I'm not going to hold the punch there. It is probably the biggest cardinal sin here is that it is a snoozer. This film would benefit greatly from a fan edit in some sort of way.
And especially, that's risky, knowing the huge films that you just mentioned that are coming out around that time. And if they wanted to bring this back for an original kind of series, but if Paramount was just like, oh, we need some big blockbusters out there, you think they would go for like the jugular on the first one, like let's wow everybody.
Absolutely.
Not the case.
Not the case, and almost so much so that the stage set for Wrath of Khan was like, we need to save the series already. Yeah. So it's a shame, because the plot itself is a hardcore sci-fi plot. Honestly, the script itself belongs in original series, both for it being related to, I believe, an episode called The Changeling in kind of concept, but also it is a dynamite sci-fi script of how they're coming across this anomaly in space.
Okay.
And this anomaly is beyond imagination in how large it is and how complex it is, and really is an ideal Star Trek story. A theme here for this special, folks, is definitely going to be the balancing act of what Star Trek is about, which is discovery and investigation, and then sprinkles of drama and action, and maybe strategy as well in there. The main piece of it being discovery and investigation. This film almost gets there. They're interacting with something really out there, but man, it is just reaction shot. Then we look at what they're flying through in space, and then it's back to reaction shot, and it's back to what we're looking at in space, and you know, believe me, 2001, one of my favorite films of all time.
Absolutely.
The type of long, drawn-out shots that Stanley Kubrick builds in that film are very purposeful.
I was going
to
to say,
the mood.
had purpose.
Absolutely. This feels like it's trying to rip off the style for no apparent reason.
You think that's interesting?
It's like an amateur attempt almost.
So this was, how long was this? So it's over 2 hours. So what if it was like almost a TV special where it was like an hour and a half or even like an hour? It probably would have been so much better.
Sweet spot. And maybe that even, I of course, full speculation, maybe that even plays into the fact that this script was supposed to be maybe episode 1 of this phase 2, yada, yada.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So who knows, you know, and then maybe just they had to stretch it out and, making things really moody and, you know, psychedelic almost.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In that same reason for this kind of, again, a hodgepodge of different themes in sci-fi, there are some real odd sequences that horror is explored in this.
I love that. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And I think more often than not with motion picture, those sequences for me are refreshing because I know they are totally out of left field. I am kind of marking it as a bad criticism-wise because of all the big thoughts and the big feelings that this film is trying to convey through its sci-fi plot. Honestly, those sequences where horror is introduced in a slight way or kind of an unsettling environment really kind of takes you out of it, honestly.
Okay. Wow.
It's not exactly a good one. So more than anything, those sequences, the long reaction shots, they add to the length of the film, and that is number one criticism. This film is just far, 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 far too long.
It should be 90-minute.
It should be 90-minute. Should be much more to the point, especially if you're going to, let's say you really want to spend the time on the exploration of space and the surreal elements of what they get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
It is, it's just... it takes so long to get there, and then the subject matter itself is a slog. I mean, it is a slow movie, but it's a shame because there's a lot of cool elements. I would say the script itself is almost the ideal Star Trek script in the subject matter and how it ties to what they're trying to discover. Unknown, uncharted parts of space and interacting with aliens or powers that are well beyond what the Federation understands. Mm-hmm. This is that, but it's just handled in such a poor way.
It fails in other areas.
Absolutely. One big positive, and this will be actually something that I maintain for across all 6 of these films, is the practical effects. I think if there is anything that is a universal highlight across all 6 of these films is that the practical effects of the ship, of any sort of space anomaly, anything that special effects or CGIs would be used for, is top-notch practical effects, and they hold up extremely well.
I mean, that's awesome, first of all, and It's great to hear. I mean, some of those original episodes of the series were not the complete opposite.
Oh, right.
So that's awesome. They had the big blockbuster budget behind it as well.
Absolutely.
And how great is it to be watching a movie how many years later and it to keep up like that?
Absolutely. I did originally start with comparing some of the Blu-rays versions to this version, to the normal standard definition version. There's nothing changed like you would have actually in the Star Wars sequels or the sagas, but the good thing about that is that they both hold up, and sometimes that's not the case with Blu-ray either. Sometimes the enhanced definition kind of hurts the visuals.
It can, definitely.
Yeah. But that really is where I stand on motion picture. I think confused in what it's going for, in its style, and it's a shame because I think the script is kind of wasted.
It is a shame. Just the fact that it's called Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It's like this is the one.
Yep, this is the one. This is the one. For the sheer amount of it being a snoozer, it's really hard to recommend this film because do I think it hits on an objective of necessary watching for a Star Trek fan? No.
Yeah, but if you're a Star Trek fan, you're going to watch it. It's material
that has
Star Trek in front of it.
Especially since the original series is only 3 seasons. You're craving for more.
Well, I was going to ask that. So, okay, you're not a Star Trek fan. Let's say do you need to watch the motion picture to move on to the other ones? Do they reintroduce the characters? Or is it just like, okay, are the films made knowing who the characters are? Yes. We're not going to go through all of that.
Yeah.
It is like that.
Yeah, all the films are definitely direct sequels to the 5-year mission of those 3 seasons.
Okay, so imagine, let's say, well, maybe you're younger and you just haven't watched the original series yet. Maybe you've never been a Star Trek fan, but okay, let's watch the movies. Mm-hmm. Is it still, most people know what the deal is with Star Trek, but let's just say for those who don't and watch it, they won't be completely lost if the first thing they're watching is the motion picture.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be completely lost in the sense that it doesn't really get involved into maybe the deep concepts of who's outranks who on the ship or on the bridge,
right?
And
full on character development.
Exactly. It is. We are jumping in to a sequel to what's been around there, but they're dealing with such massive stakes right off the back that the movie is about itself.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay.
So I do agree with what you're saying. You could probably tread water if you just jumped into this.
Yeah,
film.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, but for that reason, I think again, not a stellar film. I can't really defend this one too much because, again, listen, I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'll probably try to cook up a fan edit at some point in my life of this film because I think it really can be an amazing film if you just chop off a lot of fat. But for that reason, we're going to go ahead and give the motion picture a 36.
Wow. Oh, that's worse than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, then again, you did say Wrath of Khan. They bring it in to save it. Almost.
Absolutely.
But 36. Wow. Don't want to go back and watch it now.
Yeah, honestly, I can't say it's worth it. And I think for any of the folks out there that are Star Trek fans, I think the sentiment is really the same, is really dead on, that it's more of a shame when you watch it. It's just so slow. And
I'm just, didn't it come across me? This might be the most. This podcast could sink us or propel us. I mean, we're talking about we have Trekkies listening to this,
right.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Listen,
we could be tanked
that
the moment this podcast is put out.
Listen,
starting with a 36%.
Starting with a 30. Well, listen, that's why I prefaced it. You know what I mean? I'm a fan. You know what I mean? I'm saying this with tears in my eyes.
So how about this? So 36% for the motion picture. Now, do we need to watch it to bring us to the second movie, The Wrath of Khan?
Thankfully, no.
Okay.
To give a little bit of a microstructure of things, Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home is almost its own little trilogy in things, which is really nice. Motion picture is, once again, an anomaly in tone and an anomaly among the 6 movies we have.
Right.
So
we're back 3 years later.
Yep.
1982. The movie's just under 2 hours now.
Mm-hmm.
And how does The Wrath of Khan save or not save the 6 films?
I'm happy to say The Wrath of Khan absolutely saves it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well known as well. I mean,
100%.
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan is a phenomenal film and hits the beats again of what I think a good Star Trek story is about. Is that it's about some level of discovery and investigation, and then drama and action is sprinkled throughout that.
Right, and properly done as well.
Exactly. Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban, is a presence on screen, and they promptly lead off the film with him, which is just so great. I mean, just to compare these two films from start to finish, it's so muddy in motion picture what they're up against. It's so abstract.
Okay.
Where Wrath of Khan, it leads off with who is our antagonist? Why do we care? Why are they menacing?
You know exactly what the deal is within first 15 minutes of the movie.
Absolutely. And is really a masterclass in showing and not telling the menace of Khan. Once again, as is with a good amount of these films, Khan was in the original series, in Space Seed, I believe the episode was called. So once again, a mild callback. We have a film now being a mild callback to an episode in the original series, but to its own credit, you don't really need to see that. Space Seed also isn't that good of an episode. So we have the film being, standing on its own 100%, and it just ties into the menacingness of what Khan is able to do on screen, just his stature and how he commands. Really great stuff. The film also focuses on the best of what we care about, the main crew, the best part of the crew.
Yeah, it's so true, yeah.
The friendship between Kirk and Spock. Also, to what we were talking about, is maybe watching the original series required viewing. I think for this one, that maybe dips more into it. This is a late sequence story. This is developed. It very much plays on the knowledge of how much these characters have gone through. Maybe doesn't call back specifically.
It probably makes the movie just more impactful. You're going to care about it more. The emotions are going to be higher if you have gone through this journey with these characters for the 3 seasons.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that plays very, very plainly and very directly into the friendship between Kirk and Spock, which is great. I think for the drama of it, or rather, if I'm going to be stressing that discovery and investigation is the most important part, we have Kirk investigating and discovering something massive to the story and actually personal relationships that we see for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Kirk obviously is this debonair, lady killer throughout the whole series, but we actually get familial ties in this film, which is great to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say where this starts, this does start a little bit of a slippery slope with some of Kirk's motivations that I will definitely be criticizing in Search for Spock and Voyage Home, but at least for this film, it does not detract from it at all, and more so used for proper motivation of how much Kirk is really going head-to-head with our main antagonist, Khan, of course. So, but I gotta say, I mean, as far as that balancing act of drama, action, and discovery, the pieces that tie together how Kirk and team is able to outwit, outmaneuver, outstrategize Khan. It is a solution to a plot element. It is a solution to a story that is very plainly a Star Trek solution. It's not dipping too much into a blockbuster finale or things just kind of self-resolving themselves, which unfortunately later movies in this franchise fall victim to, because whether the production was a little bit more hasty or Hollywood getting more involved than Paramount, who knows?
Did they not know that the movies were going to continue? Like with this, I'm sure maybe they had 3 already scheduled.
Sure.
I mean, who knows how that all played out?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Were they taking it film by film at a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
where with this, they knew a third one was coming. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where it leaves off, but or how much they knew intentionally behind the scenes of how much they want to grow the series of just these movies. But Wrath of Khan really is just the perfect balancing act. It's everything you want. It's everything inspiring, but also menacing, and especially what they're up against with Khan. And that discovery element is really there. It's not going too far away from the mission statement of them exploring the unknown and finding new things in the galaxy, which is fantastic that this film really does hit the fun watch of watching maybe a villain and conflict on screen, but still hitting the main beats of what a Star Trek story should be.
Right.
For that reason, though, we are going to give Wrath of Khan a 79.
79. Ooh, so it doesn't quite break the 80 mark.
I don't think it breaks the 80 mark. I think...
And to touch on that, again, I mean, most people are, I think, picking up on it, but especially since we're getting a lot of new listeners. Once when you break the 80 mark, that's kind of what we think are should watches. Such good movies, you should go out of your way to apps. These are films everyone should watch.
Absolutely.
So this just doesn't quite get there.
I think it doesn't quite bridge that gap, and obviously, I mean, it's kind of trivial maybe not to give it 1 point more for how much I really do enjoy this film, but I think true to our kind of mission statement for like a watching guide or an audience guide, if you were not a Star Trek fan, would I consider this a must-watch? You need to, kind of find a way to watch this? I don't know. I don't think it is. That's not distracting at all from it being a phenomenal film. That's not detracting at all from the fact that, how much I enjoyed this as a Trek fan as well. It's just more so understanding where that sits with my criticism and, how much is this going to be useful for audience members.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love that score. I think that's probably where I would put it. Right there, high 70s, honestly. I mean, it's still a heavy hitter.
Absolutely.
But I think I would be right there. I, too, wouldn't put it quite in the 80s.
Absolutely.
Love it. Okay. Well, let's keep on going then. We have the Wrath of Khan. We now have The Search for Spock.
So this is a direct sequel, as The Voyage Home will be, to the events of the previous film. So I'm going to try my best to stay away from spoilers, but these are where the films start to take a dip for me. And it's unfortunate that Leonard Nimoy, the man who plays Spock, the actor, directed these because, I would want these to be better, to see him behind the chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Search for Spock is just a really slow, depressing start to the film, and it's honestly pulling teeth to get the band back together. We have a separation of our main crew in the beginning of the film, and to get to the point that we are all back together, we're back to basically a square one where, you want the movie to start. You want, the movie to begin with who you care about on the screen.
And pick up where you left off.
Exactly.
Immediately, yeah.
It takes just way too long on this film, and really pulling teeth is exactly what I would describe it as.
I wonder if that's what people were thinking too. I mean, I'm just looking at, Wrath of Khan came out in 82, and then The Search for Spock came out in 84 already. And you have to think viewers in the seats in the films are thinking the same thing. Like, it's still fresh. 2 years is not a lot. They go from film to film.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be fresh and like, okay, let's keep this story rolling.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't quite give you that. It takes a while to bring it back.
It's like restart. They really got to jumpstart the engine of things, and it's a shame because the film does reach a point where there are interesting things happening on screen. I'll get into a little bit of the conflict of the film in just a moment, but especially for the end of it, some of the conclusion feels rushed, and it just makes you wonder, what were we doing for the first maybe 1/3 of the film?
So it's like Act 1.
Yeah.
It's just preparing things.
Exactly.
And they don't need to be.
Exactly.
It's like self-inflicted wound, kind of.
Especially with how much they build up what getting back together, the band together, getting back the crew together means in opposition of the Federation. Star Trek obviously is tied directly to the Federation and their goals. So in this film, we find our crew going a little bit against the grain, against some orders, kind of in a maverick way. I think that's fine as a plot device, but that really does bite these next two films in the ass because there are consequences set in the beginning of this film, and they are only accreased upon, but then slowly, there are no consequences to the actions of our characters. And it feels very weak, and it feels
unimportant,
waste of time. You know what I mean? I'm sorry to say.
Takes your heart out of it a little bit,
exactly,
probably. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
When especially Star Trek is based off of the realism, the real stakes. I mean, this is a show where probably a good quarter of the episodes are court-martials, you know what I mean? So it's about real consequences,
right.
In a system, in how does space work? How does an organization like this work? So, I'll get into it more. But another thing that I want to focus on is I feel the conflict is very weak. These later films, I feel, have a hard time keeping up the stakes. With Search for Spock, that plainly lands in the fault of the Klingons. The Klingons are not menacing at all. I'm forgetting the guy's name.
It's the exact opposite of what you want also.
Exactly.
I mean, especially when you're talking Klingons, I mean, you want them to be absolutely
cunning war masters, you
want to be scared shitless.
Absolutely.
Of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Where the Klingons in here are honestly bumbling fools. They're played as a joke in a lot of scenarios. Maybe there is a certain unruly chaos and unpredictable madman element that they want to go with the Klingons. I'm forgetting the actor's name. Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd as the main Klingon as well. He, I like the actor, but he just plays it so goofy. He plays them as like kind of exasperated, flustered, focused with taking control of a situation, but not really understanding the situation. And it reminded me of what honestly I can't stand in the newest Star Wars sequels, that the Empire is just like not menacing at all. The Klingons in this are just not menacing at all. Yeah,
it's just not what you want.
It creates weak stakes, and most importantly, even if you have no appreciation for what the Klingons should be, let's say even you are watching this with new eyes, there's nothing compelling about the villain on screen. You don't like the villain at all because they're pointless. They're window dressing, which is a real shame. Of course, in the name itself, we are missing Spock, and I think that really, really, really hurts the chemistry. Just how the highlight in Wrath of Khan was all around that this was a late story in the sequence of these characters' lives, and we can, jump into more developed type of plots, more developed type of character interaction between all of the main cast. Missing Spock, as someone as so critical as Spock, is a really, really horrible misstep, because we are missing this magic mix on screen. You know what I mean?
Incredibly crucial person.
Yeah, for the first season, there are 2 names given in the opening credits, and it's Kirk and Spock. You know, we're missing that half, and that's really the way to see it. It also spotlights other characters. Other characters honestly get to step up to bat a little bit more in this film, which you could say, all right, I like that.
Yeah,
you know,
let's
I
see
like
their chops, kind of.
exactly.
Yeah. Let's build on this character. And
yeah, honestly, the acting is all over the place. We have some good performances. I would say Sulu's pretty good. Uhura's pretty good. I would say Scotty is probably a pass fail. There's some definitely some good and bad. McCoy's really not the best. But when it comes into the point I'm trying to make with that is that because we move someone so big and someone that would have a focus, maybe even a plot, B plot ownership for the film, without Spock, it's missing a magic element.
Okay.
Last thing I'll state is, again, the consequences of the film are non-existent, and it's a real shame for something that I pride myself as a Star Trek fan off of its realism, its stakes, its role in the greater picture of the world it crafts.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? You care about the Federation. You care about what are the goals of these nations battling.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And to have both of the nations that are the spotlight for this film, one be goofy and inconsequential, and then the other, man, just has no realism to it off of a film, off of a series that has only realism, it really falls short for me. So
Okay, so what do we end up giving it?
I'm going to give Search for Spock a 53. I think more than anything,
All right, yeah.
you know, more than anything, it is something that's going to have to be a watch when it comes to coming off of Wrath of Khan. And much like I was saying in the previous, in some of the previous series that we've done now, at this point in the film, or at this point in the saga, if you've watched this far into the films, you're invested. You're going to give it the time that you need to dedicate towards it to understand the greater story at play.
Yeah, especially if you're saying, there's a mini trilogy kind of in here. And it makes sense. I mean, so we have 82, that was 84, and now again, 2 years later, 86, we have the next installment, the 4th film, but kind of the actual 3rd in this little trilogy as you set up, kind of. We have The Voyage Home.
The Voyage Home. For a very long time, folks, I have said that The Voyage Home was my least favorite Star Trek film. This film incorporates a time travel element. That's not really a huge spoiler, because really all over this film it is flavored 80s as 80s as it can be. My first note here after watching it was 80s extravaganza.
And not in a good way.
Right. And don't get me wrong, there have been time travel elements in the original series. Once again, there are elements of this in the original series. I forget what episode it is, but the specific scientific way that they explore the time travel element is explored in the original series. So, once again, a good foundation that they're starting with. The particular time travel is done for very high stakes in the film as well. A abstract threat is threatening the Federation, and this now overtakes what will be the looming consequences of what the crew of the Enterprise have done in the previous film. So, they have to kind of go back and talk to mom and dad, essentially, and something takes place of that in the precedent. This causes a need for this time travel plot, and all very engaging at first, all very true to Star Trek and the duty that these crew members have to protect protect the society, the Federation as a whole, and what they're after. So all good stuff there. I can't stress enough, though, this is not a Star Trek film.
And again, Leonard Nimoy is in the director's chair.
I know. And he taps out after this. Of course, I have no idea what could have happened behind scenes, but I don't know. Now, this one, as much as I don't like it, it is kind of well revered online and among fans just because it's not technically a bad film. As far as it being kind of an 80s comedy, sci-fi, wacky story, it doesn't necessarily achieve that in a bad way.
So if you're looking at it at a different way, if you start watching the movie, you have different eyes, basically. Mm-hmm. But if you're coming from it from the Trekkie, okay, I'm following off of the original series. I'm here after the original series, after the first 3 films. Mm-hmm. You're going to take it how you're taking it now.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think watching it sequentially, it's definitely a whiplash effect.
Now, if I go and I just like, okay, let's just put this on. I'm in the mood for an 80s comedy space movie.
Right.
It's like, sure, it's a relatively okay time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the window dressings of it are enjoyable. And there is enjoyment in the movie. There are generally funny parts. There is kind of a cleverness to the plot and why they have to be in the 80s very specifically.
Okay.
But man, is it just mismatched with the reality of what's going on in present day for the story and the severity of what is introduced in the first, fifth of what the movie is.
Yeah.
It is some serious stakes, and you're watching this and you're really engaged in it as any kind of sci-fi would be, but definitely a Trek fan. You're seeing what's happening on screen and you're saying, wow, how are they going to get out of this? And there's just such a mismatched lightheartedness among the film.
And it just takes you out of it.
Exactly.
It's just the problem with, it's a lot of problems of movies today.
Exactly. And when the stakes are probably never higher for the crew of the Enterprise.
So you could have had some real intensity. You could have had real emotion in these scenes.
Absolutely.
And it's just boom, they take you out of it.
Yeah. And I honestly, I don't know what they would have done otherwise because...
Could have made a better movie.
Very true. Very true. But I don't know what they would have done otherwise in the sense that, the film is so much in the 80s that, like, it is the movie.
Yeah.
It would be an entire re-envisioning of what Voyage Home would be if you changed it. So definitely I can't say deserves a fan edit and might be better. This is, down to the core. It is an 80s comedy. So I think the time travel, not the worst I've ever seen. I feel like we've honestly been reviewing as of late a lot of above average time travel stuff. But
right.
The time travel is pretty much identical to what they do in the show. So nothing too bad there. But once again, for the finale of what this mini trilogy is, and if anything, the stakes of what the crew of the Enterprise has done and what they have to return home to face for what they've wanted to do and this kind of maverick disobeying orders, even in the plot of the film itself, them coming back home, them trying to find a resolution to things really just puts the cherry on top of no consequences to the films so far. There is a meaningless conclusion because of how much of a happy ribbon bow is put on top of it, and just because there's a successful win, that there's nothing else that needs to be done. If anything, actions that would be taken almost paramountly in any other version of the show, specific episodes, other iterations like Next Gen, are completely thrown out the window, and if anything, rewarded in the film.
Okay.
And it really doesn't feel like Star Trek, on top of the comedy coding of it. A shame.
Yeah, I'm interested where this is going to land.
I think, why don't we just jump right to that then? Because... it's really just going to be me harping over how much I just don't like the feel of...
You're upset that it's not Star Trek.
It's come on, guys. Roddenberry's not dead yet either. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, what's going on here? The silliness aside, like I would say... As far as a film, it functions. It is entertaining. It's just not a Star Trek film. For that reason, there's a little bit of a give and take, a little bit of pull in both directions. But I think for me, The Voyage Home lands at a 39.
Okay. So what you thought was your least favorite is your second least favorite by a hair.
By a hair, yeah.
But for the most part, the Voyage home and the motion picture, little clunkers.
A little lackluster. Yeah. It's a shame because of course, again, I can't overstate that I really do love this franchise, and this criticism comes from an equal part of film criticism, but also criticism for the fans and for a viewing audience that may be jumping into this and exploring and really chipping away at the massive amount of content that is Star Trek.
I mean, there's a lot of people who haven't dipped in. Maybe there's the new ones or something like that, but there's so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I strongly believe that watching these movies, you'll come to a similar conclusion that at most you'll be left with kind of that was all right, if not worse, where I land in a critical outlook.
So safe to skip the Voyage home before we go on to the next one?
I would say so far, and I'll definitely recap this for where I sit with this. I would say so far as a watching guide, it is Wrath of Khan or bust. I don't think there is much you need to watch beyond that until we get to maybe some of these later ones, but we'll obviously get in a second.
So before we get to the last two, especially before Shatner takes the director's chair there, we're just going to take a break and talk about the value for value model. So we're not going to have a producer segment here where we go through all the producers that helped donate and help support us. This is just a special, so we don't kind of do that on our specials, on our special episodes. But we do just want to take a second to remind you we're operating off of the value for value model. Do you find value in this podcast? Are you going to the website, checking out all the ratings and all the information we have on there? If you're enjoying it and actually using it, if you could, donate something to us. What value did you get in monetary terms? So you can go on to dailyratings.com, go to the donations tab, and just contribute if you'd like. You can send in a note as well, and we'll read it. We'll read it on air here. And there could be a lot of feedback on this one.
Crucify me.
Hey, I mean, I think
I'm
all
open
of these,
for the fight.
I think all these make sense too. To be honest with you,
Right.
They're definitely laying down where I think they should be personally. Regardless, so if you could value, I called you. I think I called you guys listeners earlier. We don't want to look at you as listeners. We want to look at you as producers. We would love to kind of start our own little thing here. We want to grow. Who knows? We want Vin to get as large as he can, and maybe he can actually do the the fan edit.
You're right.
Let's get. We need it. Yeah.
You have to fund the.
We
fan
need a couple
edit
more downloads, I think, before we get there. But actually, the support we've been getting and just some of the feedback, and we see the numbers are kind of going up, and we just really appreciate it. And again, monetary wise, it costs some money to do this, and it certainly takes a decent amount of time to do this. So, producers, we would appreciate it. DailyRatings.com, donations tab. Now, let's go. We have two more. Let's do the Final Frontier. We have William Shatner now sitting down. It's 2 years later. It's 1989. Shatner and Vin, what do we have? Final Frontier.
So Final Frontier is, among fans, among kind of online criticism of this, is actually the least favorite film of hardcore fans. And it's primarily because this film is very surface level. It's very Hollywood. Actually, watching this film, and I would be curious actually to hear from some of our audience, upon maybe even rewatching this film with hindsight of the remakes, the JJ films, did this feel like a JJ film in how flashy and how quick and how surface level a lot of the science fiction is? They're just kind of introducing things and moving it faster and faster. I think that was an overwhelming feeling, and my first note here in watching this, and that it feels like the first Hollywood Star Trek.
I mean, that makes sense. I'm sure Shatner had a lot to do with that.
Right. Yeah. And hey, I didn't say it actually for the last two films. I love Leonard Nimoy. I love William Shatner.
We adore him.
Yeah.
Adore him.
So, I mean, this criticism, hey, listen, everyone's got to stumble. So, the team, as far as the actual actors, are working, looking their worst physically. What year is this, actually?
This is 89.
This is 89. So,
it's a lot of movies. Like, there's a lot of Star Treks came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
They're not going to look better, though, right? I mean, the time keeps on going. It's just noticeable, right?
It's weird because the next one, they look better. I think just like the makeup was maybe just real dicey. And
that's hilarious.
Yeah. They look bad. I would say for the saga and reviewing all this, special effects as well. Also, probably the least impressive impressive. Again, my praise of it that I mentioned in motion picture, and I really, not to sound like a broken record, that really does get applied to all of these films. So keep that in mind, especially if that's going to be a big positive for you watching
I
these
know
films.
for me it would be a huge that kind of stuff I really care about.
Absolutely, absolutely, and to see that it holds up in a major way that you can still kind of engage you, absolutely, that's huge. I would say it is the weakest in this film, not necessarily bad though. So there's just some little moments, little sequences. There's a jet boots sequence that is a little odd.
Okay.
You can very see that it's wires, and it is what it is. So we'll see where the funding is. We'll have to do some research, but a little bit of the plot here, because it's an odd one. This film deals with Spock's brother. Now, big positive. By this point in the story, we finally have Spock back to normal in his position among the crew of the Enterprise. So we finally get Spock back, and fortunately we get a very Spock-focused story. Leonard Nimoy is really the main focus here as the... I struggle to say this as an antagonist, but the antagonist is Spock's brother in this.
Okay.
So, interesting, right off the back, a fan's ears would perk up. And say, oh, well, Spock's brother, how do we get involved in that? Man. There is such a lack of stakes because of Spock's brother being, related to Spock and not necessarily evil as a Vulcan, just kind of different in logic and whatnot. A very, very little conflict motivation. It's almost kind of like we get introduced to things and then we're all just kind of progressing somewhere in the plot. And it's
not a lot of stakes again?
Yeah, not a lot of stakes again.
So you don't care that much about that? You just don't care where the film
goes.
And
they are going to something that does have stakes towards the very end, but where, oddly enough, it falls through is, I do think, very plainly either in the writing or in Shatner's directing. Again, I go back to this analogy of it felt like a newer film, like the JJ films, or just a newer film in Hollywood in general. All the sci-fi elements, very brisk, very quickly do they cover, what are the implications of what they're interacting with. That's both for the conflict, but also their solution to it.
Okay.
It is missing the most important third of what I've been describing, the discovery, the investigation element.
It's such a huge part.
Exactly.
That is Star Trek.
Yeah, and it's a shame because they're going, or at least the script and where it goes in the beginning of the film, Spock's brother, they're saying what they're saying, and you're watching this film, you're saying, wow, this is pretty high stakes. This is something I'm interested. It is fumbled in the execution throughout the film, and boy, oh boy, is it fumbled in the finale of the film.
That is such a shame. So it had unbelievable potential.
I'm not going to lie.
Was it the writing? Was the entire plot awesome, and it was the writing and the acting that killed it? Or it was just no, the writing was good, and then it completely dropped off?
I think the thing is, why I have this as a major positive, I think the writing and the acting is pretty damn good in this.
And the gang's back together, right?
Exactly.
It's not just Spock, everyone's back. And
Yep.
Okay.
We're not dealing with any sort of hobbled version of the crew Enterprise.
Right. We're firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. It's more so how briskly they cruise along. There's no weight. There's stakes and weight. Let me maybe make a distinction there. Stakes would be my investment into the story. Weight is how does it feel to me viewing it on screen?
Okay.
How does it hit home as an audience? I think,
it's both.
Yeah, it's stumbling on both, which is a shame. And that really is my last point on it that I need to stress. Probably weak character motivation, weak conflict is why this film is so poorly reviewed online, where for me, I think it really hits home is that it is the exact opposite of motion picture, where motion picture was all substance, no style. This is all style, no substance, and that very critically is not Star Trek once again.
Yeah.
You know, Shatner was probably just trying to, what this was 89. I mean, obviously we have Star Wars reaching its conclusion. I mean, not to say it's nothing more than its contemporaries or its peers at the time, but
it was in the air. It was definitely
on the shoulder of giants. I mean, I think that's appropriate to look at how a film is made and what's influencing and what they think, more importantly, audiences want to see.
Yeah, I mean, definitely big time.
Yeah, it's just really the exact opposite. The story, the conclusion, very surface level. For that reason, man, I bounce back and forth, because if I really had to go off of enjoyment and legibility of the film, like how much you actually want to pay attention, eyes on screen, I think motion picture is lower. But for the final frontier, ironically not the final film, not the final frontier, psych, we're going to give it a 32.
Oh, what? These are
stinkers.
This is turning out to not be a good film series.
And yeah,
I'm shocked. I'm a little surprised they're this low, actually. I guess now just looking at this, I mean, yikes.
Listen, and
I'm still excited. I want to go back and watch all the 6 films.
Sure,
I'm just upset. I'm going to be upset.
Right.
In the end.
Right.
Especially when you have like a hard hitter in there, too.
I know.
Yikes.
And listen, I can't stress this enough. For my Trek fans out there, I'm not a turncoat. I am not. Do not crucify. I mean, you can crucify me. That's fine. I'm standing by my thoughts and my criticism.
But you love OG. Trek.
This comes from. Believe me,
you love it.
Next Gen has 8 seasons. I have to piddle around for scraps of roughly like 1 season and a half of really good original series Trek, because there's a lot of goofy episodes.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah. Phenomenal, but like not really good substance. So believe me, I want to love these films, especially those films when, a concept like Spock's brother is I mean, I want it.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
But they're stinkers, folks. I'm telling you.
That sucks. I mean, just to make another comparison to Star Wars, which maybe, I don't know if, I guess it's natural if there's going to be comparisons there.
Absolutely.
It's just like...
It's like the prequels. It's like how there's only 2 good Star Wars films,
Right.
It's basically that, so.
Man, that's hilarious. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's good news ahead, because here we have the final one. We have the Undiscovered Country. It's 1991, and we have Nicholas Myers.
I'm glad you picked up on it.
Yeah, back directing. He directed Wrath of Khan.
Yep.
And something tells me Paramount, because Paramount made all these, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
I mean, the production had to be like...
What are we doing? Who is our team? Who is our A-team on this?
As a fan, I would love to go see a Star Trek movie directed by Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially like... It would be the coolest thing.
Absolutely. And you think, who else to write a character story for these characters?
Absolutely. And apparently, Nicholas Meyer is the guy.
He is the guy.
So we have Wrath of Khan, and here we are, Undiscovered Country. We're now at our oldest, even though we may look better than
they
the
do
Final
look
Frontier.
better. It's really weird. They look honestly better than even the Voyage Home, the one before it, Star Trek 4.
Yeah. Okay.
It's an odd one.
And this is the conclusion. This 6th film, the Undiscovered Country. How does it fare?
I am very happy to say that the return of Nicholas Meyer, and probably there's more credits to give. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on the ratings behind the director credit, but there's probably a much larger team responsible for this, for what I think is a very positive reception of this film. But we finally have a Star Trek movie, which what I would call class. There is a finally a weight to what's on screen, a seriousness taken over, and
that's some of the Star Trek I love the most.
Absolutely,
I love when it really gets intense and it really hits at that, because it can be lighthearted, of course. It can be kind of weird and silly and goofy, but some of those deeper, really emotional, impactful moments that's
Yeah.
That's where I love the series.
Absolutely.
And that goes for Next Gen, too. I mean, that goes for all of it.
And I think it's perfect that you're even referring to it in a way as intense. You know, someone may understand that as, oh, is there a lot of action? No, we're saying, like, there's intensity in the stakes.
Intensity in the drama. And how is it delivered. And
this is great because basically the central plot element is that there is a disassembling of the neutral zone between the Klingons and the Federation. Right off the back, the Klingons are handled in such a 180 from what we saw in Search for Spock, and really a lot of what early Star Trek was, that Klingons were maybe a little bit more goofy. We see menacing Klingons. We see
That's exactly what you want.
Strategic masterminds, the Sun Tzus. You know what I mean? It was that's what I love, and it's great because even though there's some goofiness to the interaction on the Enterprise side and among our main crew, it's honestly welcome. The comedic elements of this film are welcome because there is such a tenseness between these two sides that you need that kind of release valve.
But it's done appropriately and at the right time. They don't take you out of a very serious moment,
right?
With just like, oh, let's just throw in some comedy here.
Absolutely,
it's done it's done tastefully and properly.
Absolutely. We finally have a return of plot devices that were first set in motion with Kirk from Wrath of Khan.
Good.
Which
you know what this reminds me of? This is like J.J. Abrams coming back and trying to save what he can of the Star Wars.
Sure.
In the most recent one that came out.
Nick Myers.
It might have been Nick Myers just being like, I am taking my baby back.
Right.
I'm doing what I can here.
Coming back into the fold. Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry.
The return of some of those plot devices, I'm happy to say, folks, it retroactively makes up for some of the lack of consequences of the earlier films because, again, no spoilers, but there is a major plot device relating to Kirk, and how he processes it in the previous films is so laughable. It's like, did it really happen? You're asking that as an audience member. And the fact that they incorporate it and Nick Myers and team bring this back to be a central conflict point between him and the Klingons is just so masterfully handled. It is awesome. I love it to death. It is fantastic. It finally feels like there's consequences to character actions too in this interaction between Klingon leadership and the crew of the Enterprise. There is almost a mismatch in why is the crew of the Enterprise talking to this elite leadership of a nation, and it finally puts them in the line of fire that they have to be accountable for their actions and previous actions in the film. So once again, honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head, Tom. Now that you said it, there almost is an apology of this.
It's correcting all the wrongs that were made.
It's doing it all.
It's Nick Meyer just saying,
listen,
don't worry, I'm here, and everything that was wrong, I'm going to do my best. I only have one film to do it in.
Right.
I am doing my best here.
Right.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I'm really quite excited to see this. And I want to go back and watch all the other ones just to get to this point. Yeah.
Absolutely. The CGI, again, probably second, or special effects, I would say, second best. Second worst in relation to it. Again, I think it's just probably a reality of we're getting farther and farther in the decades, and they're trying to be cutting edge. Exactly. Yeah. They're trying to be cutting edge in a way, and again, it's just one of those things that I'm not going to knock something for looking old. Hell, one of my favorite movies is Aliens, and there's some very rough, or Alien, and there's some very rough special effects in there. But if it is done in a tactful way, if it is relatively timeless, then that is what I'm concerned with as a critic. So, finally, in this film, we have the Federation and the Klingons, really a serious force in the story, and it feels good because for a story so developed and a story in the sequence of where these characters are in their life, we are dealing with leadership of the Federation, leadership of the Klingons. We are at the very tippy top, which is, again, maybe what all these films should have been about, and the stakes are bred from there, are a byproduct of that, They're dealing at a higher level, very simply. They're not just this exploration vessel out in space.
It's so much bigger than just the ship now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And more than anything, hits the magic mark. Discovery / investigation, and then sprinkling in drama and action / strategy. That is what it is about. We have the famous, actually, probably, let me think here. Yeah, I don't think there was a single kind of court-martial element in any of these films. We finally have tones of justice, which are obviously a big factor to the original
Star Trek
series.
fan just looking for a court-martial.
Right, exactly. I just want law. I just want consequence. But we finally have that. But I can't stress enough, this isn't just like a boring political Star Trek film or anything like that. There are good blockbuster beats to this, and I think the crew is looking great to try to fill that role of there is exploration, there is adventure, not Indiana Jones, but there is
that classic Star Trek.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement to it. So I really do think it hits the perfect balancing act. And for my rating, this may be controversial as far as where all these movies stand. Certainly how low some of them have been, but specifically for this one, I was really positive on this because finally it was following through on what I wanted as a Trekkie. Again, I'm coming from, I'm on your side, I'm on the team, guys. I'm not just trying to shit on these films. It finally was a follow through of what I think Star Trek is about, what Star Trek in a movie form should be about, and what maybe most importantly any general audience can dive into and say, wow, this is
absolutely.
Star Trek, vertical slice, everything it's about.
And that's what it's supposed to be, especially when you have a motion picture like this.
Absolutely.
You want everybody in the seats.
Absolutely.
And engaged.
Yeah. Exactly. And we tap on each piece, each layer of that vertical slice of what Star Trek can be. And thankfully, they hone in on the good parts. And again, I give full credit to the production team behind it. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned. Don't give your IP to your main actors. They may not know
Sometimes
what
it works out, but just not here.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey. So?
Undiscovered Country, we are going to give an 80.
Oh, wow.
Cracks the 80.
It actually cracks it.
Absolutely.
I was not expecting this. I'm
sure a lot of people weren't, actually.
And obviously Wrath of Khan, of course, is going to be the highest.
Yep.
Oh, my God. I'm excited to go back and watch these now.
Absolutely.
I'm shocked that you have 3 30s in there. And
I am
poor
too.
Leonard Nimoy.
I know.
I do. I adore the man.
Know. Rest in peace. Yeah. But listen, I mean, these films, I think it's a gentle balancing act of, yes, maybe are they fun to watch as a Trekkie? Sure. But, I think even from a Trekkie or a Trekkie's viewpoint, there are serious problems with what the priorities of these films are, and it makes you question, is this necessary watching? Is this necessary viewing? And that's where a lot of the scores came from, is like, where do I position this in what time? I mean, you could watch 6 episodes of Next Gen for the 3 movies that are in the 30s, and fantastic. Now you're moving on to better stories, better acting, all around better content for the franchise. So I think it's very important to look at these things critically, and hey, you may be watching them all regardless, but that's at least my hot take on it.
And I think it's a great bow on top with the 80 at the end. It gets into the must-watch, and people can come in here and watch it. They probably should maybe know a little bit about what they're going into in order for it to be that must-watch. Yeah. But fantastic. After that slog, it's nice to end on the 80. It really is.
I was happy to, because I really wasn't expecting it either. And
how great as a fan for you to go back. You've been watching them for how many years now, and to go back and actually realize different things about these films that you thought you probably knew almost in the back of your hand.
Absolutely. And specifically with Undiscovered Country, I didn't take it lightly too, because in my rewatching of it, I said, wow, I'm thinking I kind of like this better than Wrath of Khan. And I gave it a second watch in addition to this set.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I said, I'm confident in
it ticks that extra, that one. It's by one.
Absolutely.
But that makes all the difference, really.
And it's the balancing act of all pieces. It's not too much much of one thing, and it really it does the full dance. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did the Star Trek ones. We have more specials to come.
More Star Trek movies too.
Yeah, as well. Anything you'd like to add here, or we'll be rolling credits here?
Listen, especially if you are not specifically a Trek fan, do not let some of these ratings deter you. Star Trek is one of the greatest franchise ever made, and hey, just watch the shows.
Alrighty, folks, so we're going to do a brief recap here. In order, we have The Motion Picture at 36%, The Wrath of Khan, 79%, The Search for Spock at 53%, The Voyage Home at 39%, The Final Frontier at 32%, but finally, we have The Undiscovered Country at an 80%. Vin, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll see you next week, folks. We'll see you as well, and we appreciate it so much. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from our product. You'll get a mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.